Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of our 7 Days of Horror Halloween series for this year. We hope you've been enjoying all the episodes so far. We have been loving them. We hope you love them as much as us. I'm actually really excited about today's one because I am an absolute fiend for some animated horror films, be that genuinely creepy or family friendly, like, anything in between. If it's animated and it's a bit horror-y, I'm there, mate. I love it. And Sky's exactly the same. So
Usually,
Sky, do you want to dive in?
stop animation is my shit. To anyone watching us on our YouTube channel, you can see behind me I have some anime, because we will be talking briefly about some anime as well that's being included, but I have some anime figurines. I have more importantly my Nightmare Before Christmas
It's a shrine.
memorabilia. What it is, because the Night Before Christmas, I think I might just bully Leanna into talking about it because obviously it's Halloween. It's like my favorite film. It just is. It makes me a basic bitch, but it's the truth.
No, it's like the most important part of Sky lore.
Yeah.
Nightmare Before Christmas.
Yeah. That, and again, YouTube viewers, Rocky Horror Picture Show. There's like the two
Big
things that
two.
really
Yeah.
they define me. If there was a summoning circle, you put those in there, I'm there.
Yes, I completely agree. See, I think I'd love to start this mini-sode with some talk of like introductory horror. Because when me and Sky were planning this, we kind of, we talked about the obvious stuff like Night Before Christmas and Coraline and Paranorman. But then we kind of touched on the idea that like a lot of people were introduced to horror through childhood films. There's the obvious stuff which probably shouldn't be for children, so Watership Down. Sky, you haven't seen it, have you?
I haven't. And
But you
even
know
as a 26-year-old, I'm not ready.
No, I don't think you ever will be. It terrifies me. All I'm going to say is maybe give it a Google, maybe don't, because you could be scarred for life. Yeah. Watership Down kind of goes into this category of like other family friendly films of like the 70s and 80s, which looking back, like kids should not have been watching. Like The Dark Crystal. What the hell was that?
A
Scarred for life,
masterpiece,
mate.
Leanna. That's
A
what it was.
masterpiece. And like while this isn't animated, it's puppetry, and it kind of just
Yeah.
reminds me in tone of some of the stuff we're talking about today. The original animated BFG. Let's talk about it. That is
Yep.
horrifying.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen
Do you
it?
know what it? Yeah. Oh, have I seen it? Of course I've seen it. I think it was our introduction into the uncanny valley. At the end of the day,
Yes.
that's what it is. Like, this is the animated horror episode, minisode, but I feel like we could have almost called it the uncanny valley, or
That's
our
such a good
delve into the
point.
uncanny
Yeah,
valley,
yeah, yeah.
because that's what it was. But for some of the kids ones, it was just the fact that they were a bit too hardcore for kids films. But for a lot of other stuff, like the Dark Crystal and
Yeah.
things, it was just that you watched it and like it was like kind of human like, but it wasn't. And
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's like you're at that age where you're like, I don't know why I find this so creepy, but I really fucking do.
Yeah, especially
And
like
it's
your brains are developing and you're feeding into your brain this
yeah.
whole warped perception of reality.
Yeah,
It's not
exactly. And
very
I
good.
think like a lot of like 80s films did that. Like Never Ending Story is similar, there are parts in
So
that where you're like,
true.
oh, this is a
I
bit
didn't even think
terrifying, even
about
as an
that.
adult. This whole episode could have just been like childhood films that terrified us. But
Yeah,
you know,
traumatizing and terrorizing.
but
Yeah.
exactly, but really the most interesting part to me is like the animated ones, because like it's easy to scare through creepy puppets and all, but I feel like animated stuff, it's kind of like harder to scare you because at the end of the day, like you're so aware it's flat, like you're aware this isn't real. So
Hmm.
like to scare children through animation is pretty, I don't want to say fun, that sounds really weird and morbid, but like it is interesting. And I think the
Yeah.
main one I want to bring up on that front is Scooby-Doo Zombie Island.
Yes.
Because what a bloody classic, honestly. I think
Yeah.
while a lot of us watched the films our parents grew up on and we found it way creepier than they did as kids, because different ideas of what is cute and what is creepy, I
Hmm.
think that like Scooby-Doo Zombie Island, like for our generation, was like a proper like initial horror. Like it kind of introduced us to scary concepts. And I, for one, am a big advocate for children should be shown some creepy stuff. Like you shouldn't, like not, put on The Exorcist for a 6-year-old, but like you shouldn't shield children from like,
It's character building. Like, all jokes aside, it kind of is.
yeah,
Like,
no,
I can pick out the stuff that I know for a fact I shouldn't have watched at the age that I did,
yeah,
and the stuff that was like, it was age appropriate, still debatable, but like the animated horror kind of thing, I do feel like I'm a better person for watching them. It
Yeah,
prepared
and
me
you
for
just
a
kind of,
lot.
yeah, you're more prepared for like darker stuff and darker content. Like you shouldn't really go from like Barbie films to then watching horror films the day you turn 13, 14. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
that
you
is
need,
worse. That
yeah,
is
you
so
need
much
that gate,
worse.
you need that gateway stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like I feel like that's really present as well in like The Last Unicorn.
Mm.
Because there's some really creepy moments in The Last Unicorn, and not necessarily like visuals, but like the stuff they say to me is horror. Like
Hmm.
when the unicorn becomes a human and she's like, I can feel my body dying. Like, fuck me, this is dark for a
Yeah.
children's film. I stand by that's not a children's film because I enjoy that
Hmm.
more as an adult than I ever did as a kid. But just to circle back to Zombie Island, because I always go on tangents about The Last Unicorn. Zombie Island was great because it had like creepy moments throughout it where you're like, oh yeah, this is Scooby Doo, you know, like it's a bit camp, it's a bit silly. And then in that last bit of the film, it genuinely gets like scary, especially for
Hmm.
children. Like, you know, when they turn into the cat people and shit, it's like, what
Yeah.
the fuck is happening? It's
Hmm.
like probably the first time I watched like a horror twist
Hmm.
in my entire life. I don't know about you.
Well, it's obviously because it still sticks with you to this day. Do you know a film that kind of did that for me? Okay, so I think it came out in 1996, but I
Mhm.
just know for a fact that anyone listening who has seen it is instantly going to know which one I'm on about. There is a live action Pinocchio, again, 96, not the most recent one. Okay, so you've not seen it because you don't know what I'm on about. It is
What?
terrifying. It
Really?
haunts me to this day. And I used to actually think that it was a horror film. And then
Hmm.
I watched it, I think, when I was like, I think maybe 19, turning 20. So obviously I was a lot older when I first watched it. And it wasn't, it was meant to be a kid's film, but it was another one that fell under that problem of it was parts of it were just too much. But it didn't include anything that wasn't in like the animated version.
It
But the bit
just
that
looks
sticks
so much
out,
creepier.
like the bit where the kids were turning into the donkeys. The puppet itself was terrifying as
Don't
well.
even start with me because growing up, I could not watch Pinocchio purely for the donkey scene. Like it honestly used to make me cry my eyes out. Like
Mhm.
that is terrifying for
It
children.
is
And like
horrific.
even as an adult, you watch that, it's like body horror.
It's also because it feeds into like the darker reality of just like kidnapping and things like that.
Yeah, see,
Like,
what's funny is that's not even what I'm getting at. I just find the
no,
donkey shit genuinely terrifying. But I
I
get what you're
understand what you're
saying because I
saying.
feel
Yeah.
like I get what you're saying because I feel like on a subconscious level, that is also what you're thinking about during all these scenes.
But that's one that, yeah, sticks out for me. As I say, I guess maybe for you it was Scooby-Doo Zombie Island, and for me it was that fucking
Yeah.
Pinocchio
I
film.
mean, you were a Return to Oz kid as well, weren't you?
Oh, I fucking love Return to Oz. But it is another one that it's like,
But that one's more intentionally weird, surely. There's no
I
way all of
think,
that.
okay, I think so, but I do think it was, yeah, it was another one that was marketed. Was it? How would I know how it was marketed? I,
Yeah.
but I don't think it was marketed as a horror. I do
Mm.
think it like tipped
Yeah.
between that, but definitely, I wouldn't. Actually, I was gonna say I wouldn't show it to my kids. I probably will.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, there's just so many where it's like you could never really tell if it was meant to be creepy or not. Like Labyrinth, fucking fantastic film, but there are moments in it, you know, which
Yeah.
are quite eerie. Like
Hmm.
the ballroom scene. What the fuck?
The thing is, though, that's a classic example of things that have also aged really
Oh yeah.
poorly.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So,
And
yeah.
that's the case of stuff like Watership Down as well, though, where it's just like maybe
Mm.
we are just like you know, different generations can stomach different content. You know,
Hmm.
it's hard to know.
I
And
think a
like,
good comparison from like Watership Down would be something like The Black Cauldron.
oh my god,
Um,
what a bloody film!
because again, absolutely terrifying. A great, and another one of those things that it's like only, I'm not saying that like only so many people have seen it, but only certain people have seen it. Like some people have no idea what the hell you're
Yeah,
talking about.
yeah.
There's like I know there are so many dark corners of Disney. I know that there are, but
Mm.
there is a really specific dark corner of Disney where films like The Black Cauldron live, and you were a certain kind of kid who grew up in a certain kind of
Yeah.
way that saw those films.
Honestly, the people that saw Black Cauldron growing up are the ones that had parents that made them watch like The Never-Ending Story and
Yeah.
Labyrinth and stuff. Do you know
So
what I
our
mean?
parents.
It's that like existing fantasy fan in the
Yeah.
parents, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
But what's so interesting to me is like even now with like, you know, the internet and people doing more of like deep dives into Disney, still so many people have never heard of the Black Cauldron. And it's just because it bombed so hard, didn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Which is to me quite sad because it's like, what would Disney be like today if their darker venture didn't bomb.
Do you
Because
know what I
I
also
like Disney
think?
Unbearable because of how light it is.
I think part of the problem as well is that it's like you just talking about people going into like deep dive conspiracy theories, and like also the original stories that Disney films were based off. And people put the horror of Disney, obviously for a lot of reasons, but this side of the horror of Disney down to that, like, why the hell did they make kids' films off of really horrific stories? But films like The Black Cauldron, to my knowledge, were just horrific stories in and of themselves.
Yeah.
You know, that was just a horrific film. You don't have to deep dive anything.
No.
You just have to watch it to realize, yeah, this would probably traumatize a kid.
But it's also so gorgeous. And
Oh
this is my
yeah.
thing with a lot of like the films talking about today is like they're horror in this really pretty way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so like even Scooby-Doo Zombie Island, the animation in that film is really gorgeous, really for a Scooby-Doo film. The Black Cauldron, very pretty. Watership Down in its own bizarre way, very pretty.
The
Um,
colors.
yeah, and then
Yeah.
I'm gonna say I kind of want to dive into a little bit of stop motion here if we're gonna talk about
Mm-hmm.
gorgeousness.
Mm-hmm.
And we got to start with the OG, which is Night Before Christmas. Come on,
Yep.
God
Mm-hmm.
Sky, the floor is yours.
I think I may have come out of the womb watching The Nightmare Before Christmas because there's not a time in my life I don't remember it being a huge part of me. But my mom used to always tell me that I used to be really scared of it because I was terrified of Oogie Boogie.
So
And like,
interesting.
I can see it. I can
Yeah.
see it, but I don't remember being terrified of it. But then, like, when you think about that's the song, iconic, amazing.
Oh.
But that scene when he's like, if it was a horror film, he would have been torturing Santa Claus.
Yeah, when
That's what we need to
the like
realize.
gambling scene, you mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's intense. It's
Yeah.
terrifying. It's one of the best villain songs ever.
It's so stylistic as well. I love it.
Oh,
Like,
it's
oh,
amazing.
fantastic. Honestly, Night
Mhm.
Before Christmas is great because it's like it's not like actually genuinely super scary or anything, but like yeah, the Oogie Boogie moments can like have that
Mhm.
eerie vibe
I
to them.
think it's also that classic, again, uncanny valley, but that classic stop animation
Mm,
that is so eerie because it's not like it's gorgeous, but it's not quite it because it's not fluid and it
yeah.
is
It's
it,
a bit
it,
janky now, isn't it? But
it
I kind of
is.
love that. It's so
Oh,
endearing.
I do as well. And like, you know, there are a lot of like animated films that have come out now that use obviously digitalized stop animation that
Mm,
are amazing. They're great.
mm.
But there is something about that like old school
Real
classic
deal, yeah.
that would turn, I mean, yeah, The Night Before Christmas had kind of slightly traumatizing elements for a child, but it turned anything, Wallace and Gromit, terrifying.
Ooh, yeah,
Why was it
don't.
terrifying? Like, I'm not talking about that weird video that came out at some point. I mean, like the original. Why was it
It's a bit weird.
terrifying?
It's like the frame
But
rate
it,
and the uncanny valley aspect, like we were saying.
and that's it, yeah.
Honestly. Whereas like and then you could like, you know, you skip forward and like a massive like follow up to Nightmare on Elm Street in like, you know, in the spiritual sense is Coraline, you know?
Mhm.
Because
A Nightmare on
you know,
Elm
you've got
Street.
similar sorry.
You said A Nightmare on Elm
Nightmare Before
Street.
Christmas.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, like it's like a spiritual successor in many ways, isn't it? You've got
It
similar
is.
people involved, like Henry Selick and stuff. And
Mhm.
like Coraline has such a similar vibe to me. I think it's because you get those moments of like neon lighting and your
Yep.
daytime scenes and your nighttime scenes. And like,
Mhm.
so if you did just sit there and critically analyze them next to each other, you can really see why they have a shared fan base, you know,
Mhm.
aside from both being you know stop motion, but they've
Mhm.
both endeared because like endured, I mean, because they both have like they both have the adult fan base and the children's fan base.
Mhm.
And I think honestly like doing the Lord's work via that, like it's so insane to me because it's like you're The Night Before Christmas, which did so well, and it's just like in the public consciousness, and then there just
Yeah.
wasn't, as you know, to my knowledge, another massive stop motion like horror film
Not in the same
until
way, yeah.
Coraline. Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's like how fucking long later?
And then I
Oh,
think Coraline, it was still made in a similar way as well, because Coraline's older than we think. I can't remember the year it came
yes,
out,
it's
but it
like
is older than we think.
2009 or something, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then
Um,
even then it's based on a much older book by Neil Gaiman.
exactly. So I do, yeah, I think classic stop animation is always going to have its horrific elements. But just kind of going back a bit to you talking about how even like, yeah, 2D flat kind of animation can still have its moments. We can't not talk about anime
Oh
shows and
yeah.
films that
Mhm.
have like you forget you're watching an animation. Because for some, I mean, obviously I know Scooby-Doo Zombie Island is a bit different because it is a kids show, but for some it's like you have that safety of the fact that it's animated. There's you really feel distance from it because it's not real. But then there are some things, like say Perfect Blue, for example, that you forget so many times that it is not real in every sense. It's not real in every sense.
Yeah.
But you forget.
Yeah.
And it is so disturbing.
That's what good animation does, though. Like it can be hyper stylized, but you're just so bought in. You're so absorbed into the world. It doesn't have to look hyper realistic or anything. If you're sold into that world, then the horror works. And in such a different way, because you can show such different things and such surreal things. I mean, it's no secret Darren Aronofsky ripped off a lot of stuff like Perfect Blue in like Black Swan and all. And think about how much people were like, oh my God, the stuff in Black Swan is so creepy. And it's like, that all comes straight from an anime film, and I love that. Like, I literally, if there's going to be like one film I tell all the listeners to go and watch after this, it's probably Perfect Blue if you haven't already. I don't even know how to describe it without ruining it. It's just quite surreal. It's kind of like Black Swan vibes is the best way I can
do definitely look up content warnings before going to watch it, though, because it does have very, very uncomfortable scenes in it.
Scenes that would be a lot, like, don't get me wrong, they're really horrific in it, but like if it was live action, it would just be like, oh my God, like I wouldn't be able to watch it if it was live action, like that. But like Perfect Blue does so much because it's like, it's so creepy anyway, like the content and the like voice performances, but then like the style of it is nuts. Like I don't know how to explain it, like the coloring and like the Y2K animation and like just
this is another thing as well, that like I really think so many horror creators today are really missing out on what animated horror could deliver. Because you look at stuff like in anime like Tokyo Ghoul that have like these the creatures and things like that. Obviously, like, you're really limited when you're doing live action. Like, even if you have a big budget, you can, as we've seen in a lot of films, you can fuck it up by having like CGI that is so realistic that it crosses that barrier into no longer looking realistic, and it really takes you out of it. Whereas with animation, there's no bounds. Your bounds are literally your imagination.
And also, because if you're like, to go into like the whole like design aspect again, if you've got a animated horror film, the scenes which are real and in the scenes which are an effect, there's no effect, you know what I mean? It's all animated, so there's no moment that takes you out of it because it doesn't look realistic. It all looks the same. And I think that's why things like you mentioned Tokyo Ghoul, that's why it works. That's why the more like gory moments of like, say, like Neon Genesis Evangelion, they work really well, especially end of Evangelion, like fucking mental, deranged. And then say moments in like Death Note, even they're so dramatic, but they work within the context of it and the style. And there's this film Belladonna of Sadness, and it like the horrible scenes in that, because they're animated like the rest of it and super like psychedelic and surreal and 70s, it just like you get absorbed into a vibe, you're never taken out of it, which, like you say, with CGI you can get really taken out of the moment and you kind of lose you lose all tension because you're kind of so aware of the fact it's a shitty
Death Note is like a really good example of that, because like there have been two big live action versions of that. There was the Japanese version and then there was the American version. Obviously the American version had a lot of flaws for different reasons, but two things they 100% shared is obviously you had the Shinigami. Obviously you had to bring them to life. One thing that the American one kind of, I think, got right in the beginning is they didn't show Ryuk fully. Because then the moment they did, oh my God, it was horrendous. And obviously because the Japanese one came out so much I wouldn't say it came out so much younger, that's not a sentence. Came out so much earlier. It was even worse.
Yeah, of course.
And it just all of a sudden it became really comical. Like, obviously I know that Death Note has its funny moments, both intentional and unintentional. But it was so hard to take it seriously at any point.
There's just some stuff that doesn't translate to looking live action. Like Ryuk does not translate at all, and like it's such a shame because Willem Dafoe voicing him. Oh my God! Like, I remember when that was announced, everyone was like, "Oh, hold on a minute."
This was it. I remember thinking, I was like, hold on a second, maybe,
Ooh, do you
maybe.
know what? Do you know
And
what?
then,
Yeah,
no,
it
because
just
we
shows
had
that they
like,
knew their audience and all, but then at the end of the day, that doesn't matter if you're still using crap
yeah.
CGI. And it could be the best CGI in the world. Some stuff just doesn't look right in live action. It
I
just doesn't.
wonder how it would have worked if maybe they tried to use puppetry instead, because I do also appreciate
Yeah,
that
that's a good point.
puppetry, especially big puppetry, can also look terrible. It just can, because you are still
It's still
limited.
like living physical
Well, that's
stuff,
it.
you
You're
know?
still limited within the
Yeah,
realms of reality, whereas in
yeah.
animation, obviously, you're not. But I wonder if maybe, yeah, it would have worked better if, like the American one did in the beginning, they kept him kind of hidden, but
Mm.
they used puppetry and masks instead, which I know obviously costs. Well, actually, I say I know. I don't know if it costs more money. I have to assume it costs more money,
Yeah, yeah.
because you know you have to employ so many people and like the actual materials and things like that. But yeah, this is now just me wondering of what could have been.
What could have been? I think
Yeah.
what haunts me at night is the thought of like, all the rumors about live action Akira. Because
Mm.
Akira, ooh, the animation Akira, like that made history. It broke records for like the amount of money spent on an animated film.
Mhm.
It's one of the like most expensive films of all time in Japan. I think it was like the most expensive animated film of all time. Insane, so
Mhm.
gorgeous, and directed by the guy that wrote the manga. Have you ever seen Akira? I feel like you have.
I don't think so actually.
Oh, that's nuts. But
I
like
feel like you've
animate
spoken about it so much and I've
that
like
you've almost
seen
like
parts of it. Yeah.
exactly, yeah. It's like animated body horror is so fantastic because it's like you can just do such creepy stuff with the colors and
Mhm.
all. And it's like, you can have like certain organs look like bright purple and blue and like that it's not all just
Mhm.
red like it would have to look in live action. And I honestly like I freak out at the thought of this like live action Akira that's rumored because it's like you're gonna lose so much of what works,
Yeah.
because it's cyberpunk, right? Which
Mhm.
Ghost in the Shell also is, and the live action of that, no thank you. Like Ghost in the Shell doesn't lean into like horror like Akira does. Like Akira really leans into like body horror, but like it's just there's just some stuff it doesn't translate. Imagine trying to make a film of Scooby-Doo Zombie Island, like because Scooby-Doo
Well,
Zombie
they
Island is
did they
actually a
did
bit
make
scary.
they did make
Well,
live
this is where
action
I'm getting
films,
to.
Leanna.
They did the live action, but those were more fun. Whereas
Yeah,
Zombie
they
Island
were.
actually
Yeah,
gets
yeah,
quite
yeah.
creepy, so that one
Mhm.
wouldn't work,
Mhm.
And like I think if you tried to make like a live action The Black Cauldron, that wouldn't work either. Like all these ones that are super
Mm.
stylized, you just couldn't do it. Like if we're just going to dip back to like stop motion for a second before I go back again to anime because Attack on Titan, oh my god, like say like trying to make a live action of Corpse Bride.
Oh yeah.
No.
Well, it's like Corpse Bride is a really good example, because obviously that's one every Halloween pops up.
Yeah,
People do cosplays of, and they look gorgeous.
yeah.
Like they all do look so gorgeous
As a
because she's such a
costume, it's
gorgeous character.
beautiful. Yeah.
But there are still elements, i.e., the fact that she has a skeleton arm is a big
Mm,
one.
yeah.
Like you can't really replicate that.
Exactly. You
So
just
yeah.
you can't make that look gorgeous outside of like a photo shoot.
Hmm.
Like it
Yeah,
just doesn't work.
exactly.
And like,
Exactly.
have you ever seen Paranorman?
Yeah.
Yeah, like that's such a cute film because of the stop motion, isn't it? And
Yeah.
like the little like I honestly I don't understand how they like did stop motion ghosts.
Right. This is something that I don't think enough people appreciate. And I think this is same thing applies to anime as well.
Yeah.
Is that, look, I get it. I love when live action stuff gets made sometimes. But a lot of people don't realize that the way in which something was made is a big part of why people liked it.
Yeah.
Like Paranorman is a big one. Like the only reason, not the only reason, but like a big part of why it works so well is because the animation style, because even if they made a 2D version of it,
Mm,
it would also be bad. Like it's
yeah.
not just if you made it a live action, but it's just because the artistic style that was used was a big part in why it just works so well. Anime is obviously a bit different because a lot of the time it comes to the fact that it's a Western world trying to
Yeah.
replicate something that they can't even be
They don't
bothered.
fully
That
try to understand
they
the
don't,
context.
because
Yeah.
it's just not, it's, to me it's just never made by people that were even fans of it in the first place.
That's
But
bad.
like you said about Attack on Titan, you've never seen the live action
I
Attack on
never
Titan films,
will.
have you? Oh, they are so bad. They're so bad, but you know what, I've watched them maybe 2 or 3 times
Mhm.
because I'm obsessed with how much they look like a student-made film that someone made at a Comic-Con.
That's
Like, the
like a
costumes
tribute to it almost.
but the thing is, the costumes are almost completely accurate, and they look
Mhm.
so bad because it's like nobody dresses like that in real life. It just
Mhm.
doesn't work. And this might be a cause for debate, but I actually don't think the animated Titans were that bad considering.
They actually look pretty good considering the year it came out.
Yeah, like they didn't have as much what word am I trying to say here?
Difference?
Yeah, no. Well, yeah,
Differentiation?
that's it. I don't know why. I find it really hard to pronounce that word sometimes. Well, yeah, the differences between them, they weren't like super varied,
Mm.
but I don't know. I keep going back to it because it's like, I think especially when you're a big fan of something, as you know, if you haven't seen any of our earlier episodes, maybe you don't know, me and Leanne are huge Attack on Titan fans. I'll watch anything,
Mhm.
absolutely any morsel or crumb that they give me related to that anime, I will just eat it up. So yeah,
Oh,
this
yeah.
is again me just admitting how much I'm part of the problem when it comes to stuff like this.
No, honestly, like I think Attack on Titan is probably like the best one we could end this on, right? Because the horror of Attack on Titan is fucking fantastic because it just like it works in animation. It just works in
Mhm.
animation. Like you've got the silly Titans, but they're still creepy. Like they
Yeah,
managed to still make them look weird and like
it's the fact
still
that they're
freak you
silly that
out.
almost makes them creepy because they're
Exactly,
unpredictable.
exactly. Because it's like, yeah, they look daft at first glance. You're like, haha, but then they'll still fucking bite you in half. And like those moments, like people getting torn apart and limb from limb. If it was like live action, that would be the main focus. But because it's
Mhm.
animated, it's not. You know, because like while you see the gore, it's not like you're seeing every organ. You're just seeing like a lot of blood. And I
Mhm.
think like also in Attack on Titan is also quite tasteful a lot of the time. Like
Mm.
someone will die and it will be like in the shadows or like
Yeah,
you only get hints of it and they're just
or
like
you'll like find the body afterwards.
exactly, and that show's just so fantastic at like knowing how much to show you. I think
Yeah.
it's like my favorite example ever of animated horror. Like I recently showed my boyfriend Attack on Titan, and he did not expect the gore. Like, and the worst bit is like, I didn't even think about it. I know that sounds
Yeah,
terrible,
you
but
don't
I was
after
thinking of
about
the
a
later
thousand
show.
seasons.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Like, I was thinking of the political aspects and like, yeah, there's these massive things called Titans trying to come after humanity. I forgot to mention that they eat people. Because like yeah, you see it, but like you see
Yeah.
it so much more earlier on, and then you kind of forget about that later. The horror comes from different aspects later on, not just gore. It comes from like more psychological and existential and ethical
Mhm.
dilemmas. But like, yeah, those first few episodes of Attack on Titan, fuck me. Like,
Mhm.
obviously, if you're listening, like you know, we're going to talk about exact moments in these like films and shows, but like,
Yeah.
Erin's mum getting eaten,
Mhm.
that is honestly one of the most horrifying animated things I've ever seen because it's like
Yep.
it's when she gets torn or bitten or whatever and the blood spatters. That's always
Mhm.
been something really excellent in Attack on Titan, which I really want to see in like other animated horror. Like just the way they play with like blood is so interesting in that. Like I
Mhm.
rewatched Kill Bill Part 1 in the cinema the other day and it does a similar thing where like the blood is kind of just like one color and
Mhm.
it's solid, you know, and it just kind of
Yeah.
like sprays in this really exaggerated fashion. And like to me, that's like one of the best bits of Kill Bill is the
Mhm.
animated sequence of Oren Ishii. Do you know the bit I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it just
100%.
works
Yeah.
so well. Like the violence
Mhm.
in that scene just is like, I know it sounds terrible, but you're like, it's cool. You know,
Mhm.
and that's kind of how like Attack on Titan comes across at some points, isn't it? It's like, oh, this is
Yep.
cool, which is terrible, but
I think the best
so
way
good.
to end it is just like whatever kind of animation it is, whether it's stop animation, 2D animation, puppetry. I mean, I guess because they all started out as kids' things, but
Mhm.
obviously we always will associate them with children's entertainment.
Mm,
So when you do get adult themes or just actual adult films and TV shows made from them, there's just something horrific in a different way. Forgetting the actual horror that's in them, just the fact that they are animated
yeah,
is,
it's
yeah,
enough.
I have no words. I have no
We
words
will
left.
probably, around when this episode is published, we will probably put some moments on our social media of like best animated horror moments, you know, little
Yeah.
clips or stills, and we want to see some of yours. So like let us know some of your favorite moments in animated horror. Because
Mhm.
I want some examples. I want to be introduced to new stuff.
Oh yeah, because we know there's ones that we've definitely not been able to speak about. So just
Let us
yeah,
know.
let us know the ones that sit with you to this day, the ones that you watched as an adult and were like, what the fuck? You're like, how did I watch that as like a 12-year-old?
It's nuts.
But yeah, just let us know. Also, make sure you're following us on all of our socials as usual, because we still have a few more episodes to come out for this 7 days of horror. We never officially decided on a title, but it is 7 episodes. It's Halloween. That's all you need to know.
So yeah, leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed this, and we hope you're looking forward to the rest of this week's videos. And that's it for today. So bye.
Bye.